I'm Rebecca Wilson, and turning 30 was supposed to be a milestone worth celebrating. Instead, I sat alone in my apartment, staring at my phone that remained silent except for automated birthday wishes from dental offices and clothing stores. Meanwhile, my Instagram feed showed my younger sister Natalie boarding a first-class flight to Paris, a surprise gift from our parents because she makes the family proud. The caption under the family photo at the airport twisted the knife, supporting our star as she deserves. I wasn't even invited to the send-off. Before I dive deeper into this family drama that changed my life forever, I'd love to know where you're watching from. Drop your location in the comments, and hit that subscribe button if you've ever felt invisible in your own family. This story has twists you won't believe, and trust me, the revenge that karma served was worth every tear I shed along the way. Growing up in our Georgian colonial house in an affluent Boston suburb, the Wilson family appeared picture-perfect from the outside. My father, Richard Wilson, built his reputation as one of the city's most ruthless corporate attorneys, while my mother, Janet, a former Miss Massachusetts runner-up, channeled her perfectionism into organizing charity galas that got her name in the society pages. From the manicured lawn to the family portraits in matching outfits, everything about our life was carefully curated for maximum impression. From the moment my sister Natalie was born, 3 years after me, the family dynamic shifted in ways I was too young to understand but felt intensely. Where I was thoughtful and reserved, Natalie burst into rooms with a natural charisma that captivated everyone. When we were young, it seemed innocent enough, my parents rushing to capture Natalie's spontaneous dance performances on camera, while my straight-A report cards were met with distracted nods and perfunctory good jobs. Rebecca always does well academically, my mother would tell her friends at lunch, the dismissive tone suggesting my achievements were boring and expected. But Natalie, she has that special something. You should see her light up a room. The pattern became more pronounced as we entered our teenage years. My 16th birthday was completely forgotten, because it fell on the same weekend as Natalie's dance competition in Providence. I spent that milestone birthday alone at home while my entire family drove 3 hours to watch Natalie place third in a regional competition. When I brought it up the following week, my mother seemed genuinely confused about why I was upset. "You've never been one for big celebrations, Rebecca," she said, somehow rewriting history. "Besides, you know how important these competitions are for Natalie's future." What future required coming in third at a regional dance competition was never explained to me. I threw myself into academics, believing that perhaps my parents' approval was just one achievement away. I became valedictorian, earned a full academic scholarship to the state university, and graduated with honors. For my high school graduation, my parents gave me a leather-bound planner to keep organized in college. That same summer, they bought Natalie a used convertible when she earned her driver's license, celebrating her C average, because she really applied herself this year. Even my choice of major was an attempt to earn their approval. I loved literature and dreamed of studying English, but my father scoffed at the idea. "What kind of job will that get you? Be practical, Rebecca. That's always been your strength." So I studied accounting, telling myself that my parents would finally respect my contributions when I had a stable career and financial independence. Meanwhile, Natalie enrolled in a prestigious fashion school in New York, with our parents happily financing her apartment in Chelsea and her frequent inspiration shopping trips. 2 years later, Natalie dropped out of fashion school, declaring that the structured environment was stifling her creativity. Rather than expressing disappointment, my parents nodded understandingly. "College isn't for everyone," my father said. The same man who had made it clear that anything less than a practical business degree would be a waste of my time. I moved to Chicago after graduation, taking a job with a respected accounting firm, and establishing myself as reliably competent. Every Sunday at 6 p.m., I would call home, an obligation I maintained, even as the conversations grew increasingly superficial. My mother would spend 20 minutes detailing Natalie's latest adventures before asking almost as an afterthought, "And how are things with you?" before interrupting my response to comment on something happening in her kitchen. Family gatherings became exercises in invisibility. At Thanksgiving, I would sit quietly as relatives fawned over Natalie's latest career, pivot, or boyfriend, occasionally glancing my way to ask, still at the same company. Rebecca, with tone suggesting stability, was somehow a character flaw. The irony that I was the only one consistently employed and financially independent seemed lost on everyone. By my late 20s, I had built a life completely separate from my family's approval. I had my own apartment, a growing investment portfolio, and a small circle of loyal friends who actually remembered my birthday. But deep inside, that little girl who desperately wanted her parents' approval still lived within me, hoping that someday they would see my value. That lingering hope would prove to be my biggest weakness. The November before my 30th birthday, I flew home for Thanksgiving as usual. The moment I stepped through the front door, I knew I had again been relegated to background character status in the ongoing Natalie show. The entire house was buzzing with excitement over Natalie's new boyfriend, Bradley Thornton, whose family apparently owned half of Connecticut, or something equally impressive to my status-obsessed parents. "Rebecca, you remember the Thorntons, don't you?" my mother gushed during dinner, though I had never heard the name before in my life. "Bradley's father serves on the symphony board with the Hendersons." I nodded politely while pushing mashed potatoes around my plate. The Hendersons were family friends I had met, perhaps twice in 30 years, but in my mother's world, these connections were everything. "Bradley is taking Natalie to Aspen for New Year's," my father announced proudly. "His family has a chalet there." "That's nice," I replied, wondering if anyone would ask about my recent promotion. No one did. As dessert was being served, my mother launched into a speech about the importance of family milestones. "These big moments in life deserve proper celebration," she declared, lifting her wine glass. "The memories we create together are what define us as a family." I perked up despite myself. My 30th birthday was coming in March, perhaps this was an opening to mention it. "Speaking of milestones," I ventured carefully, "I'll be turning 30 this spring." My mother's eyes lit up in a way they rarely did when I spoke. "Oh yes, the big 3-0, we should definitely do something special for that." The knot of hope in my chest tightened. After years of forgotten birthdays and minimal acknowledgement, could this finally be the year they made an effort? "I was thinking I could take some time off," I suggested, emboldened by her apparent enthusiasm. "Maybe we could plan something together." "Absolutely," my father chimed in. "Turning 30 is a significant milestone. We should mark it accordingly." Over the next few months, these vague promises transformed into what seemed like actual plans. During our Sunday calls, my mother would drop hints about birthday arrangements and making sure everyone can attend. In January, she specifically told me to block off that entire birthday weekend because they were organizing something special. I hate admitting how much these small crumbs of attention meant to me. I requested Friday and Monday off around my birthday weekend, turning down a business trip to New York that would have meant a substantial bonus. I started setting aside extra money, assuming I'd need to fly home and perhaps contribute to whatever celebration was being planned. I even bought a new dress, something I rarely indulged in imagining for once being the center of attention at a family gathering. Emma, my closest friend in Chicago, was the only person who expressed concern. "Are you sure they're actually planning something?" she asked over coffee in February. "They don't exactly have a great track record with your birthdays." I showed her the text from my mother from just a week earlier. "Make sure you're free, your birthday weekend, planning underway." "I know they've disappointed me before," I admitted. "But they seem really committed this time. Maybe turning 30 is finally enough for them to see me as an adult worth celebrating." Emma looked skeptical but supportive. "I hope you're right. Just know I'm here either way. 2 weeks before my birthday, I texted my mother to confirm details so I could book my flight. Her response was unusually brief. No need to make any special arrangements. We'll be in touch. I told myself this meant they were planning something in Chicago, perhaps flying out to surprise me. The alternative, that after months of hints and promises they were backing out, was too painful to consider. 1 week before my birthday, I tried again, mentioning that I needed to request airport transportation if I was flying home. "Don't worry about any of that right now," my mother texted back. "Focus on work. Everything will work out." The evasiveness was strange, but I interpreted it as them maintaining the element of surprise. After all, what else could explain months of birthday talk, followed by sudden vagueness? Surely they wouldn't build up my hopes only to disappear. I spent that last week before my birthday in a state of nervous anticipation. I cleaned my apartment obsessively, thinking perhaps they were planning to visit. I kept my phone close, expecting detailed instructions or a revelation about their plans. I even practiced looking surprised in the mirror, determined to give them the reaction they wanted when the moment came. The night before my birthday, I went to bed early, wanting to be well rested for whatever celebration awaited. For the first time in years, I felt like a child again, excited and hopeful, believing that tomorrow would finally be my day to be seen. I had no idea that the next morning would shatter that hope so completely that I would never view my family the same way again. March 15th dawned crisp and sunny, a perfect early spring day in Chicago. I woke up with that birthday anticipation I hadn't felt since childhood, immediately reaching for my phone to find 2 texts. My father's read simply "Happy Birthday." My mother had sent "Happy Birthday, darling. Have a wonderful day." No calls, no FaceTime, no details about any celebration or plans. Just 2 generic texts that could have been sent to a distant acquaintance. I told myself not to panic. It was only 7 a.m. Perhaps they were waiting until a more reasonable hour to call with details. I got ready for the day, slowly checking my phone every few minutes. By 9 a.m. nothing had changed. By 10 a.m. the knot in my stomach was tightening. By 11 a.m. I was fighting back tears while staring at my silent phone. At noon exactly my phone pinged with an Instagram notification. Thinking perhaps it was finally details of my surprise, I opened it immediately. What I saw instead knocked the air from my lungs. There on my screen was a photo of my sister Natalie grinning broadly as she boarded a plane, our parents and several other family members visible behind her. The caption read, "Surprise trip to Paris Fashion Week. So grateful for my amazing family making this dream come true. Number family support, number Paris Fashion Week, number birthday month." My hands began to shake so badly I nearly dropped my phone. Natalie's birthday wasn't until late April, more than a month away. Yet here was my entire family, parents, grandparents, even my aunt, Patricia, and Uncle Steve sending her off to Paris on my actual birthday. I scrolled through the comments in disbelief. My mother had written, "Nothing but the best for our star. You make us so proud." My father added, "Investing in your future is our privilege. Enjoy every moment." I felt physically ill, a wave of nausea washing over me as my brain tried to process what I was seeing. The family trip I had been anticipating wasn't for me at all. The special celebration my mother had hinted at for months was for Natalie. And not only had they chosen to do this on my milestone birthday, but they hadn't even bothered to mention it to me. With trembling fingers I called my mother. She answered on the 5th ring, the sounds of an airport lounge in the background. "Rebecca, hi, did you get my text?" The casual tone, as if nothing was wrong, made something snap inside me. "Mom, I'm looking at Instagram right now. Why is everyone at the airport sending Natalie to Paris on my birthday?" There was a pause followed by what sounded like my mother moving to a quieter spot. "Oh, that. Well, an opportunity came up for Natalie to attend Fashion Week, and the timing just worked out this way. These industry connections don't wait for convenient dates. But you've been telling me for months to keep my birthday weekend free. I took days off work. I thought we were celebrating together. Another pause. Rebecca, it's just a birthday. You'll have others. Natalie actually has something important happening in her life right now. This trip could be her big break into the fashion industry. The words hit like a physical slap. Just a birthday. My 30th birthday was just a birthday, but Natalie's random trip was a family priority. Can I speak to Dad? I managed my voice tight with unshed tears. A moment later, my father came on the line. Rebecca, I know this might seem like bad timing to you, but you have to understand this is a networking opportunity for Natalie's career. It's an investment in her future. Spending thousands on a birthday party just didn't seem practical when we could put that money toward something with real returns. Practical, I repeated numbly. Right, because I'm the practical one, the one who doesn't need celebrating. You're making too much of this, he replied, his tone shifting from explanatory to impatient. You've always been so independent. We thought you'd understand. After mumbling something about having to go, I hung up and sat in complete silence in my empty apartment. The truth I had been avoiding for years was now impossible to ignore. I wasn't just less favored than Natalie. I barely registered in my family's considerations at all. I opened Instagram again, masochistically scrolling through more photos. There was my grandmother, who had claimed she couldn't travel anymore due to her arthritis, beaming at the airport. There were my cousins, some of whom had flown in from other states for this send-off. There, in matching Paris or bus t-shirts, were my parents, looking more excited than I had seen them in years. I ordered Thai food that evening, a small birthday indulgence, but when it arrived I couldn't eat more than a few bites. The spicy noodles tasted like nothing in my mouth as I sat alone at my kitchen table, 30 years old, and finally facing the reality that no amount of achievement or responsibility would ever make my family see me. The worst part wasn't even that they had forgotten my birthday. It was that they had remembered it, discussed it for months, and then deliberately chosen to make it about Natalie instead. As I crawled into bed that night, my phone pinged with one more notification. It was Natalie posting her first photo from Paris. The caption read, "First night in the City of Lights. Mom says, I've always been their shining star and now I'm where I belong. Number blessings counted, number family love, number Parisian dreams." I turned off my phone and finally let myself cry. For the first time in my professional life, I called in sick the day after my birthday. The woman who had worked through flu, who had once finished a presentation with a sprained ankle, who prided herself on never missing deadlines, couldn't face putting on her game face and walking into the office. "You sound terrible," my supervisor said when I called, concern evident in her voice. "Take tomorrow too if you need it. That report can wait until Monday." I spent that day in a fog, shuffling around my apartment in pajamas, alternating between numbness and waves of hurt so intense they felt physical. Around noon, I found myself pulling a storage box from the back of my closet, a collection of childhood mementos I hadn't looked through in years. Inside were the artifacts of a life spent chasing approval that never came. Honor roll certificates with my parents' signatures scrawled hastily at the bottom. Academic awards from science fairs and writing competitions. A newspaper clipping about my debate team winning nationals, which my mother had mailed to me with a post-it note that read, "Saw this and thought you should have a copy." Deeper in the box I found my high school journal, its cover worn from the constant writing of a lonely teenager. I opened to a random page from junior year. Mom canceled our shopping trip for my winter formal dress because Natalie had a last-minute audition. Said we can go next weekend, but that's only days before the dance. I don't even know why I'm disappointed anymore. It's always been this way. Another entry dated 2 months later. Got my acceptance letter to Northwestern today with a full scholarship. Dad said it was expected and reminded me to keep my grades up so I don't lose it. Then spent dinner talking about how Natalie might be discovering herself by failing algebra for the second time. Apparently, her artistic temperament isn't suited for math. My artistic temperament wasn't even considered when they pushed me into accounting. The pattern was so clear, so consistent throughout my life, that I couldn't understand how I had spent 30 years making excuses for it. The golden child and the scapegoat. I had read about these family dynamics but had never applied them to my own situation. It seemed too dramatic, too much like accusing my parents of something sinister rather than just human imperfection. But sitting on my bedroom floor, surrounded by evidence of my invisible achievements, I couldn't deny the reality anymore. My phone rang, startling me from my thoughts. It was Emma. "Happy belated birthday," she said when I answered. "I tried calling yesterday, but it went straight to voicemail." How was the big family surprise? I told her everything: the months of hints, the abandoned plans, the Paris trip revealed through Instagram, the conversation with my parents. As I spoke, her initial gasps of shock gave way to seething anger. "Rebecca, this is beyond favoritism. This is emotional abuse. And financially, wait. Haven't you been helping your parents with expenses? Didn't you send them money last Christmas for their anniversary trip?" I had in fact sent them $5,000 when my father mentioned they were a bit short for their 30th anniversary vacation to Hawaii. It wasn't the first time either. Over the years, I had paid for everything from home repairs to medical bills, not covered by insurance, all under the assumption that my financial stability meant I should help when needed. "And didn't you tell me they helped Natalie with the security deposit on her second apartment last year, after she lost her job at that boutique?" They had done more than that, as I recalled. They had paid her first and last month's rent too, explaining that creative careers have ups and downs. Meanwhile, they refused to help you with your student loans because it would teach you financial responsibility. Emma continued, her voice rising with each example. "Rebecca, you need to do the math here. I think you've been subsidizing Natalie's lifestyle through your parents." The suggestion seemed extreme, but it planted a seed of doubt. I spent the next few hours going through old emails and bank statements, creating a spreadsheet of every financial transaction with my family over the past 5 years. The results were staggering. I had sent my parents more than $15,000 for various temporary needs. I had paid for half of Natalie's 28th birthday cruise, which my parents had presented to the extended family as entirely their treat. I had covered my grandmother's medical bills after a fall, only to discover now that she had somehow afforded a trip to Paris. It wasn't just money either. As I dug deeper, I found a misdirected email from my mother to my aunt, sent 3 weeks before my birthday. "Rebecca won't mind, she never expects much anyway. She's always been the practical one. Besides, this could be Natalie's big break, and you know how she thrives on family support. Never expects much." Those 3 words crystallized 30 years of being treated as an afterthought. My phone rang again. It was my grandmother, presumably calling with a belated birthday wish. "Rebecca, dear, happy birthday," she began. "Sorry I couldn't call yesterday. We were so busy with the airport and then the time difference." "It's fine, Grandma," I said automatically. "How's Paris?" "Oh, it's wonderful. Your sister is in her element here. She's already made connections with 2 designers who might feature her work." I bit back the obvious question: what work? As far as I knew, Natalie hadn't actually produced any fashion designs since dropping out of school. "That's great," I said instead. "I'm glad the trip is going well." "It is. Oh, by the way, thank you for your Christmas check. Your mother mentioned you were happy to have it go toward Natalie's career development fund this year." I froze. "My Christmas check, the one I sent to you personally?" "Yes, dear. It was so generous. Your mother said you knew it would be pooled for Natalie's artistic pursuits. That's how we afforded the fashion show tickets. I had sent my grandmother $500 as a Christmas gift, as I did every year. The check had been made out to her personally. I had never agreed to any pooling for Natalie's benefit. After ending the call with my grandmother, I sat in stunned silence for several minutes. Then I did something I had never done before. I scrolled back through months of my sister's social media, looking critically at every post about her career advances and creative projects. What I found was infuriating. Ideas I had suggested to Natalie during casual conversations were being presented as her original concepts. Business strategies I had explained were credited to her natural entrepreneurial instinct. There was even a business proposal I had helped her draft, spending hours of my free time explaining basic marketing principles, now being showcased as entirely her work. As if the universe wanted to confirm my revelations, my phone dinged with a text from my cousin Jessica. Happy belated, sorry I couldn't call. Yesterday was running around with everyone for Natalie's send-off. Parents still calling you the boring one behind your back, so messed up. Anyway, hope 30 treats you well. The boring one. That's what my family called me when I wasn't around. I stood up, gathering the scattered mementos and shoving them back in the box. Something had broken permanently inside me, the part that kept making excuses, that kept hoping for approval, that kept giving endlessly while receiving nothing in return. If you've ever had that moment when all the pieces suddenly click into place and you see the truth you've been avoiding for years, you know the feeling. It's like waking from a lifelong dream to find reality both clearer and much harsher than you imagined. Standing there in my apartment surrounded by evidence of 3 decades of emotional neglect, I felt that clarity crystallize into a single inescapable conclusion: I deserved better than this, and it was time to demand it. I wonder if any of you watching have had that moment of absolute clarity about a toxic relationship in your life, that point where you finally see the pattern that's been there all along. Let me know in the comments, because what happened next changed everything. With my newfound clarity, I took an unprecedented step. I requested a full week of personal leave from work. My supervisor, still concerned about my uncharacteristic sick day, approved it immediately. Whatever you're going through, take the time you need, she said. Your projects are ahead of schedule anyway. I approached my investigation like I would an audit at work, methodically, thoroughly, leaving no stone unturned. I needed to understand the full scope of my family's exploitation before deciding how to proceed. First, I created a dedicated spreadsheet tracking every financial interaction with my family over the past decade. Bank transfers, checks, gifts, shared expenses. I documented it all. The results were even worse than my initial calculations suggested. Beyond the $15,000 in direct loans to my parents, I had contributed to countless family expenses under the guise of being the responsible one with a stable income. There was the time my father called about their broken water heater, mentioning in passing how tight things were with Natalie's tuition coming due. I had transferred $3,000 that same day. There were the regular checks to help with my grandmother's prescription costs, which I now suspected had been diverted elsewhere. There were the countless times I had picked up the entire check at family dinners, because I was the one with the corporate job. But the financial exploitation was only the beginning. I uncovered an email thread between my parents and Aunt Patricia from 3 months ago, discussing plans for Natalie's Paris trip. My mother had written, "We can use Rebecca's birthday as cover for the timing. She never makes a fuss anyway, and this way the whole family can participate without extra travel costs." They hadn't just ignored my birthday, they had deliberately chosen it as a convenient date for Natalie's send-off. Another email from my mother to several family members read, "No need to mention the Paris plans to Rebecca yet. You know how practical she is about money. She might question the expense when she's always telling us to be more financially responsible." I was being portrayed as a joyless penny pincher, while my financial support was being channeled to fund Natalie's whims. The most shocking discovery came from a misfiled attachment in an email my father had mistakenly copied me on months ago. It contained documents for a family trust I had never known existed, one established for Natalie when she turned 25. Both my parents and my grandparents had been contributing to it for years. There was no equivalent trust for me. While digging through old photos to confirm the timeline of certain events, I found a family vacation album from 3 years ago, a trip to the Outer Banks I had helped finance but couldn't attend due to work commitments. The photos showed my entire extended family wearing matching t-shirts with Wilson Family Vacation 2022 printed on them. I had never received one of these shirts, despite having paid for nearly a third of the rental house. My cousin Jessica, perhaps feeling guilty after her text about my boring nickname, became an unexpected ally. During a phone call that was initially just me fishing for information, she confirmed much of what I suspected and revealed more. Your mom always says things like, "Rebecca doesn't care about recognition," or "Rebecca prefers to keep things simple," whenever anyone suggests including you more, Jessica explained. And Natalie, God, the stories she tells. According to her, she's constantly giving you career advice and helping you come out of your shell. We all believed it because, well, you're so quiet at family gatherings. I'm quiet because no one ever asks me questions or seems interested in my life, I replied, an edge creeping into my voice. I see that now, Jessica admitted. And there's something else you should know. Remember last Thanksgiving when you mentioned your promotion? After you left the room, Natalie told everyone that you only got it because your boss felt sorry for you since you have no life outside work. Your parents nodded along like it was obvious. Each revelation felt like another brick being added to a wall between my past and future selves, a barrier that would prevent me from ever going back to the person who accepted this treatment. I discovered Natalie had been borrowing money from our parents on a nearly monthly basis, with no expectation of repayment. My father, who had lectured me about financial responsibility when I asked for help with student loans, had written in an email to my mother, "Natalie's artistic temperament isn't suited to budgeting. Better we help her now than see her creativity stifled by financial worry." The same father who had once told me to toughen up when I cried over not being able to join a class trip because they had spent the money on Natalie's dance camp. The deeper I dug, the more evidence I found that my role in the family had been established early, and never questioned. I was the responsible one who needed nothing, expected nothing, and existed primarily to validate Natalie's specialness and provide practical support when needed. I found myself wondering, would they even notice if I disappeared from their lives entirely, or would they only recognize my absence when they needed financial help or free accounting advice? By the end of my week of investigation, I had compiled overwhelming evidence of a lifetime of disparate treatment. I had created a detailed spreadsheet documenting specific incidents, financial contributions, and patterns of behavior. I had saved emails, text messages, and social media posts that confirmed my family's attitudes toward me. But perhaps most importantly, I had found my anger. After years of sad resignation and making excuses for my family's behavior, I finally allowed myself to feel furious. This wasn't just occasional thoughtlessness or unconscious bias. This was a systematic pattern of exploitation and emotional neglect that had shaped my entire life. As I organized my findings, a plan began to form. I didn't want revenge exactly. I wanted accountability. I wanted acknowledgement. I wanted at minimum for them to see what they had done and to face the reality of who they had been to me. It was time for the family accountant to present her final audit. After a week of revelations and documentation, I knew confronting my family would require careful strategy. This wouldn't be like my previous attempts to address inequities, tearful phone calls easily dismissed or hesitant emails left unanswered. This would be methodical, irrefutable, and on my terms. I invited Emma over for dinner, along with her friend Tyler, who happened to be a family law attorney. I didn't want legal action, but I needed expert advice on how to disentangle myself financially from my family. "First things first," Tyler said, reviewing my documentation. "These weren't gifts, they were loans. You need to formalize that." We spent hours at my dining room table, plotting my approach like generals preparing for battle. Emma, whose background in corporate communications proved invaluable, helped me craft language that was clear but not emotional, professional, rather than accusatory. They've dismissed your feelings your entire life, she pointed out, so don't give them feelings to dismiss. Give them facts, figures, and consequences. Together, we created a multi-pronged strategy. First, I drafted formal letters to my parents and grandmother, requesting repayment of all loans with modest interest, a total of nearly $20,000. The letters were carefully worded to reference specific dates and amounts with copies of bank transfers attached. Don't frame it as punishment, Tyler advised. Frame it as clearing the books. You're simply bringing financial transparency to your relationship. Second, I created a professional services agreement outlining my fees for any future financial advice, tax preparation, or accounting assistance. For years, I had helped my entire extended family with their taxes, created budgets they never followed, and provided financial counseling they ignored, unless it aligned with what they already wanted to do. That free service was ending. Charge slightly below market rate, Tyler suggested. That way they can't claim you're being vindictive, but they'll still feel the change. Third, I drafted a comprehensive email to the extended family, correcting the narrative about my contributions and role. Not accusatory, just factual. These are the family expenses I've covered. These are the professional services I've provided for free. These are the achievements I've reached without support. Make it impossible for them to spin this as you being emotional or jealous, Emma said. Just the facts presented clearly. Finally, and most difficult, I scheduled an appointment with Dr. Helen Keller, a therapist specializing in family dynamics. I needed professional guidance to navigate what would likely be a seismic shift in my relationships. During our first session, Dr. Keller helped me recognize the classic golden child divided by scapegoat dynamic that had shaped my family. You've been cast in a role that serves everyone but you, she explained. Your sister gets to be special, your parents get to focus their dreams and ambitions on her achievements, and everyone gets to use your resources without guilt, because Rebecca doesn't mind. When I asked if I was overreacting, she shook her head firmly. What you're describing isn't just favoritism. It's a form of emotional abuse that's particularly insidious because it's wrapped in family dynamics that normalize it. Your feelings of hurt, anger, and betrayal are completely appropriate responses. In preparation for the inevitable confrontation, Emma helped me practice responses to the tactics my family would likely employ: denial, minimization, guilt-tripping, and gaslighting. When your mother says, "You're being too sensitive," you respond with, "This isn't about sensitivity, it's about respect and reciprocity in our relationship." Emma coached as we ran through scenarios. When your father says, "After everything we've done for you," you respond with, "I've documented everything I've done for the family as well. Let's compare." We practiced until my responses became automatic, replacing the flustered hurt that typically overcame me during confrontations with my family. I also took practical steps to separate my life from theirs. I created new social media accounts where family members weren't connected, giving me space to build an identity beyond their perceptions. I researched job opportunities in other cities, sensing that a physical move might help cement the psychological boundaries I was establishing. I consulted a financial advisor about protecting my assets and ensuring my parents couldn't claim any financial hardship if they refused to repay the loans. I wrote a new will that directed my assets to charitable organizations, rather than family members, removing the unconscious leverage of potential inheritance. The hardest part was deciding on the timing and method of confrontation. A group email would allow me to present my case without interruption, but would make it easier for them to dismiss me. Individual conversations might lead to divide and conquer tactics. An in-person family meeting would be emotionally challenging but hardest to ignore. Wait until Natalie returns from Paris, Dr. Keller advised. The family dynamic functions as a system. You need all the primary players present to address it effectively. I decided on the weekly Sunday family call when my parents and Natalie would all be present. I would join as usual, but this time with a prepared statement documentation ready to email, and Emma sitting beside me for support. The night before the planned confrontation, I sat on my balcony with a glass of wine watching the Chicago skyline sparkle against the darkness. For the first time in weeks, I felt a sense of calm certainty. Regardless of how my family responded, I was reclaiming the narrative of my own life. The truth is, I told Emma when she called to check in, even if they ignore everything I say, even if they refuse to change, I've already won. I see the reality now, and I'm choosing something better for myself. I slept soundly that night, no longer the anxious people-pleaser waiting for crumbs of approval. Tomorrow, Rebecca Wilson would finally stand up for herself, and regardless of the outcome, nothing would ever be the same again. Sunday arrived with the clarity I hadn't experienced in years. The familiar anxiety that typically preceded family calls was replaced by a steady resolve. I had prepared methodically, my documentation organized in labeled folders on my laptop, my talking points printed and highlighted. Emma arrived an hour before the scheduled call, bringing coffee and unwavering support. "Remember," she said as we set up my laptop on the dining room table, "you're not asking for permission to be treated with respect. You're informing them of what will and won't be acceptable going forward." At exactly 6 p.m., I dialed into the family call. My mother answered with her usual distracted greeting. "Rebecca, hello, we're just getting everyone connected. Natalie's telling us about the most amazing dinner with a French designer." "Mom," I interrupted, something I rarely did. "I'd like everyone's full attention for this call. I have important matters to discuss." The surprise in her voice was evident. "Oh, well, let me get your father and Natalie properly settled then." I could hear shuffling on their end, my mother's muffled voice saying, "Rebecca says she has something important to discuss." The subtle tone of dismissal was so familiar, I almost smiled. Not today. Once everyone was on the call, I took a deep breath and launched into the speech I had practiced dozens of times. "I'm going to speak uninterrupted for a few minutes about patterns in our family that need to be addressed." I began, my voice steady. "Afterward, I'll be sending documentation that supports everything I'm about to say." "Rebecca, what's this about?" My father cut in immediately. "I just said I'll be speaking uninterrupted," I replied calmly. "This is part of the problem. I'm not given the same respect or attention that's automatically granted to Natalie." The silence that followed told me I had their attention. For 30 years I've been cast as the responsible, practical child who needs nothing and expects nothing, while Natalie has been positioned as the special one deserving of disproportionate family resources, attention, and support. This wasn't a natural development based on our personalities, it was a role assigned to me that served everyone's needs but my own. I detailed specific instances of disparity, starting from childhood and continuing to the present day. I described the financial support I had provided that was redirected to Natalie, the achievements that were dismissed, and the systematic exclusion I had experienced, culminating in the Paris trip on my 30th birthday. "Rebecca, you're being ridiculous," my mother interjected when I paused for breath. "You're just jealous of your sister's opportunities." "That's exactly the dismissive response I expected," I said, consulting my notes on handling deflection. "This isn't about jealousy. It's about a documented pattern of financial and emotional exploitation." I shared my screen showing the spreadsheet, detailing every loan, gift, and expense I had covered for the family over the past decade, contrasted with the support they had provided to Natalie. "As you can see, I've contributed over $20,000 to this family in the past 5 years alone, while being characterized as the boring one behind my back. Who told you that?" my father demanded. "That's irrelevant," I replied. "What matters is that it's true, along with everything else I've documented here." Natalie, who had been uncharacteristically quiet, finally spoke. So what you've been keeping score, that's really petty, Rebecca. It's not keeping score when the disparity is this extreme, I countered. And it's not just about money. It's about respect, acknowledgement, and reciprocity, none of which I've received from this family. I shared my screen again, showing the email thread discussing how my birthday could serve as cover for Natalie's Paris trip. You deliberately used my 30th birthday as a convenient date for Natalie's send-off, knowing I had taken time off work and was expecting a celebration. My mother gasped. How did you get those emails? You accidentally included me on one thread, which led me to investigate further. The question isn't how I got them, it's how you could write these things about your own daughter. My father attempted to change tactics. Rebecca, after everything we've done for you. Let me stop you there, I said, using one of the responses Emma and I had practiced. I've documented everything you've done for me as well. Would you like me to share that spreadsheet too? It's significantly shorter. I detailed the trust fund they had established for Natalie, with no equivalent for me, the redistribution of my financial gifts to others, and the systematic crediting of my ideas and assistance to Natalie. I'm not asking for apologies, though they would be appropriate, I continued. I'm informing you of changes effective immediately. First, I'm formally requesting repayment of all loans within 90 days. I've prepared documentation that's legally sound, should that become necessary. My father's voice turned cold. Are you threatening to sue your own family? I'm establishing boundaries with people who have shown they don't respect me. Second, my free accounting and financial advisory services are discontinued. If you require my professional expertise going forward, here are my rates. I shared the service agreement Emma and I had prepared. This is absurd, my mother sputtered. We're family. Exactly, I replied. Family should be where we find support, not exploitation. Which brings me to my third point. I'll be taking a break from family gatherings until we've addressed these issues properly. I'm open to family therapy, which I've already arranged if you're willing to participate. And if we refuse, my father asked, then I'll be establishing permanent distance from this family dynamic. I deserve better than what I've received from all of you, and I'm no longer willing to accept less. You can't just cut us off, Natalie exclaimed. What about holiday dinners? What about when I need help with my business plans? The self-centeredness of her response, immediately focusing on what my boundaries would mean for her, only confirmed everything I had realized. That's exactly the problem, Natalie. Your first thought isn't about how you've treated me, it's about what you'll lose if I stop allowing the exploitation. My grandmother, who had been listening silently, finally spoke up. Rebecca, darling, I had no idea you felt this way. Perhaps we could discuss this when everyone's calmer. I'm perfectly calm, Grandma, I replied. I've had 30 years to process these feelings. And I did try to discuss these issues many times before those attempts were dismissed as sensitivity or jealousy. This time, I'm not asking for discussion. I'm informing you of decisions I've already made. So that's it, my mother said, her voice rising. You're just going to throw away your family over perceived slights. I'm not throwing away anything, I answered. I'm offering a path forward based on mutual respect and accountability. Whether we take that path is up to all of us. As the call devolved into accusations and attempts to minimize my concerns, I remained steady, referring to my documentation and using the responses Emma and I had practiced. When my father threatened to cut me off financially, a laughable concept given the actual flow of money in our relationship, I simply referred him to the loan documentation. After 45 minutes, when it became clear that meaningful progress wouldn't happen in this initial conversation, I delivered my closing statement. I've said what I needed to say and presented the evidence supporting it. I'm sending the formal loan documentation and service agreement now. I'll be blocking all of you on my phone and social media for the next 2 weeks to give you time to process this conversation without attempting to manipulate or guilt me. If you decide you're open to family therapy, contact Dr. Helen Keller at the number in the email. If not, my terms stand. I hope you all make the right choice." Before anyone could respond, I ended the call and immediately blocked their numbers as planned. The silence in my apartment was profound. Emma, who had been sitting quietly beside me taking notes, finally spoke. "Rebecca, that was incredible. How do you feel?" For a moment I couldn't answer. Then, to my surprise, I started laughing, a release of tension, yes, but also genuine mirth at the absurdity of it all. 30 years of accepting the unacceptable, and in 45 minutes I had completely redefined the terms of my family relationships. "I feel," I said finally, "like I just fired a toxic client and hired myself as CEO of my own life." The 2 weeks of silence I enforced after the confrontation were both challenging and liberating. Without the Sunday obligation looming, my weekends suddenly felt expansive. Without bracing for disappointing texts or dismissive calls, I slept better than I had in years. I used the time to focus on myself, meeting with recruiters, updating my resume, taking long walks along Lake Michigan, and attending sessions with Dr. Keller to process the emotional aftermath of my stand. "What you're experiencing is both grief and freedom," she explained during one session. "You're mourning the family relationship you deserved but never had, while simultaneously freeing yourself from the obligation to keep seeking it." When the 2-week period ended, I unblocked my family's numbers with a mixture of anxiety and curiosity. Would they respect my boundaries? Would they have reflected on their behavior, or would they double down on their dismissal of my concerns? The first message came from my mother, a text that read simply, "We should talk when you're ready to be reasonable." Classic rug sweeping, as if my documented evidence of decades of disparity was merely unreasonable behavior on my part. I didn't respond. My father's message was longer, but no more insightful. "Rebecca, while I understand you may have some grievances, your approach was unnecessarily hostile. Families have different dynamics and different children have different needs. When you're ready to discuss this maturely, we're here." The implication that my methodical, evidence-based approach was immature while their decades of exploitation was somehow reasonable would have hurt me once. Now it just confirmed I had made the right decision. Natalie didn't contact me directly, but posted several passive-aggressive social media updates clearly meant for me to see. Some people just can't handle others' success, and family means supporting each other, not keep score. None of them mentioned the loans, the repayment request, or the offer of family therapy. What did surprise me was an email from my Aunt Patricia, my father's sister, with whom I'd always had a cordial but distant relationship. "Rebecca, I've wanted to reach out to you for years about what I've observed in how you've been treated," she wrote. "Your courage in finally addressing it has inspired me to break my own silence. I've always seen the favoritism toward Natalie, and while I said things privately to your father, I regret not being more vocal. If you're open to it, I'd like to develop a relationship with you, independent of the family dynamic." Her email was like finding an unexpected ally in a battle I had prepared to fight alone. We met for coffee the following weekend, and her validation of my experiences brought tears to my eyes. "Your father has always been threatened by competence," she told me. "He was the same way with his brothers. Anyone who didn't need his help or guidance was somehow a challenge to his authority. Natalie's dependence makes him feel important in a way your self-sufficiency never could." This insight into my father's psychology didn't excuse his behavior, but helped me understand it in a way that felt less personal. 3 weeks after the confrontation, I received a voicemail from Natalie that captured the essence of the family's dysfunction perfectly. "Rebecca, this has gone far enough. Mom and Dad are really upset, and I'm getting dragged into your drama when I should be focusing on my business. Whatever issues you have with Mom and Dad, don't take it out on me. And by the way, I really could use your help with the business plan for my new fashion consulting company. Call me back." Not a single acknowledgement of her role in the dynamic, Not a moment of reflection on how she had benefited from my marginalization and an immediate pivot to requesting my help. It was almost comically on brand. Meanwhile, my professional life was transforming with unexpected speed. A recruiter I had contacted presented me with an opportunity at a prestigious international firm based in London. The position offered a significant salary increase, relocation assistance, and the chance to work with global clients. During the final round of interviews, the CFO mentioned my attention to detail and methodical approach as key factors in their decision to extend the offer. "We need someone who can maintain boundaries and stand firm when pressured," he said. "Your references spoke highly of your ability to advocate for correct processes even when faced with resistance." The irony wasn't lost on me. The very qualities my family had dismissed as boring or rigid were valued as essential professional assets by others. I accepted the position feeling a strange mixture of excitement and vindication. For years I had limited my career advancement to stay within reasonable distance of my family, a family that planned Paris trips without me on my milestone birthday. Now I would be the one going to Europe, not as anyone's accessory, but as a valued professional in my own right. Emma helped me celebrate with a liberation dinner at my favorite restaurant. To Rebecca, too, she toasted, who finally realized her superpower isn't helping others at her own expense, it's knowing her worth and demanding nothing less. As I prepared for my move, a surprising email arrived from my cousin Jessica, who had maintained contact throughout the family fallout. "Thought you should know, Natalie's been freaking out since she realized you're not around to help with her business. She tried to present that marketing plan you worked on to some investors but couldn't answer basic questions about it. Aunt Janet and Uncle Richard are scrambling too. Apparently they didn't file their taxes correctly last year without your help, and now they're facing penalties. Nobody wants to admit it, but the family is feeling your absence in very tangible ways." While I took no pleasure in their difficulties, there was a certain symmetry to the situation. For years, my contributions had been taken for granted and minimized. Now their absence was highlighting their actual value. 4 weeks before my scheduled move to London, I received a formal email from my father, the first communication that acknowledged the loan documentation I had sent. "Rebecca, while we disagree with your characterization of family financial assistance as loans, we recognize the need to resolve this situation. Attached is a proposed payment plan for the amount in question. Additionally, your mother and I are willing to participate in a single-family therapy session before your departure, though we maintain that this level of formality is unnecessary for normal family disagreements." It wasn't a full acknowledgement, but it was movement prompted, I suspected, by the realization that I was actually moving abroad and their leverage was disappearing. The first family therapy session, conducted via video call with Dr. Keller mediating, was tense but productive. My parents attempted to minimize and deflect initially, but Dr. Keller's skilled guidance kept returning to the documented patterns. "What I'm hearing," she said at one point, "is that Rebecca's achievements were expected, while Natalie's were celebrated. Rebecca's assistance was assumed while Natalie's needs were prioritized. That creates an unsustainable imbalance in family relationships." My mother bristled at this characterization. "We love both our daughters equally. We just showed it differently based on their personalities." "Did you ever ask Rebecca how she wanted to be loved?" Dr. Keller asked simply. The silence that followed spoke volumes. Natalie, predictably, was the most resistant to acknowledging the dysfunction, still positioning herself as caught in the middle of a conflict that had nothing to do with her. When Dr. Keller pointed out specific instances where she had benefited from the imbalance, she became defensive. "It's not my fault. Mom and Dad helped me more," she insisted. "I just accepted what was offered. Anyone would." "But did you ever advocate for your sister?" Dr. Keller asked. "Did you ever suggest that Rebecca deserved similar support or recognition?" Again, silence. We didn't resolve 30 years of dysfunction in a single session, but it was a start. My parents agreed to continue therapy without me addressing their own contribution to the dynamic. Whether they would follow through remained to be seen, but I had done what I could to offer a path forward. 2 days before my flight to London, Emma threw me a proper 30th birthday party 3 months late, but no less meaningful. Surrounded by friends, colleagues, and my few supportive family members like Aunt Patricia, I finally felt celebrated for who I actually was, not who others needed me to be. As I packed my apartment and prepared for my new beginning, I reflected on how completely my life had transformed in just a few months. From the tearful, lonely woman staring at Instagram photos of a family celebration that excluded her, I had become someone standing firmly in her own power, creating boundaries that demanded respect, and pursuing opportunities based on her own desires rather than others' expectations. The path hadn't been easy, and the family wounds weren't fully healed, perhaps they never would be entirely. But for the first time in my life, my worth wasn't tied to external validation from people who had proven incapable of providing it. I was Rebecca Wilson, competent, valuable, and deserving of reciprocity in all my relationships. And finally, unquestionably free. 6 months into my London life, I barely recognized the anxious approval-seeking woman I had been. My flat in Notting Hill, small but filled with books and art I actually loved, rather than family-approved decorations, had become a true sanctuary. My role at the firm had expanded to include leading a team of junior analysts. My methodical approach and clear boundaries earning me respect from colleagues and clients alike. Most surprising was the community I had built, a diverse circle of friends and colleagues who appreciated me for exactly who I was. Emma visited for a week in May, marveling at the transformation. "You even stand differently," she observed as we walked through Regent's Park on a rare sunny afternoon. "Taller. Like you're not trying to shrink anymore." She was right. Years of being the family afterthought had manifested physically in hunched shoulders and a habit of making myself smaller in rooms. Now I walked with purpose, spoke with confidence, and took up the space I deserved. My new life wasn't without challenges. Building relationships in a new country required vulnerability I wasn't accustomed to. Leading a team meant making decisions without the excessive self-doubt that had previously plagued me. Dating, which I had largely avoided in Chicago, became an exercise in identifying healthy dynamics and asserting boundaries early. But each challenge strengthened the new identity I was forging, one based on self-respect rather than external validation. Back in the States, my family had settled into a pattern of cautious surface-level communication. My parents had made the required loan payments for 3 months before forgetting the fourth, a test of my resolve that I met by having Tyler send a formal reminder letter. The payment arrived promptly afterward. They had attended 4 family therapy sessions before deciding they had addressed the issues sufficiently despite Dr. Keller's recommendation for continued work. Our monthly video calls remained stilted, with my mother asking superficial questions about London while carefully avoiding any mention of the underlying issues we had yet to fully resolve. Natalie's fashion consulting business had failed to materialize beyond an Instagram account and a handful of commissioned sketches. By spring, she had taken a sales position at a high-end boutique, her first steady job in years, though she described it to everyone as creative directing the customer experience. The most significant family development came in June, when my parents finally acknowledged, after months of therapy and distance, the reality of their favoritism. "We've been reflecting on what Dr. Keller said," my father admitted during our monthly call, "about how we created different standards for you and Natalie. I'm not saying we agree with everything you've claimed, but we can see that our approach wasn't always balanced." Coming from my father, who had never admitted fault in his life, this qualified acknowledgement was seismic. My mother, too, had begun to recognize her role in the dynamic. "I think," she said hesitantly, "I might have taken your reliability for granted. It was easier to focus on Natalie's needs because they were louder, but that wasn't fair to you." These weren't the full-throated apologies I might have once craved, but I recognized them as significant steps for people who had spent decades entrenched in their perspective. More importantly, I no longer needed their validation to feel complete. Natalie remained the most resistant to change, alternating between resentment over the new family rules, meaning the end of unlimited financial support, and attempts to re-establish our old dynamic by asking for business advice or financial assistance. When these approaches failed, she tried guilt. "You've changed," she accused during a tense conversation. "You used to care about helping your family." "I still care about family," I replied calmly. "I just recognize that healthy family relationships involve reciprocity and respect." My relationship with Aunt Patricia, meanwhile, had blossomed into something precious. We exchanged weekly emails filled with real conversation rather than superficial updates. She visited me in London in July, and we spent a wonderful week exploring museums and discussing books, the kind of intellectual connection I had always craved, but never found within my immediate family. "You remind me of myself at your age," she told me over dinner at a small Italian restaurant in Covent Garden. I made similar realizations about family dynamics in my 30s, though I never had your courage to address them so directly. Watching you reclaim your life has inspired me to establish better boundaries of my own. The ultimate test of my new boundaries came in August, when I received the industry award for financial innovation that I'd been working toward for years. The ceremony would be held in New York, and I debated whether to share the news with my family, knowing it would disrupt our careful détente. Ultimately, I decided on honesty without expectation. "I've been nominated for the Meridian Award in Financial Innovation," I told my parents during our next call. "The ceremony is in New York next month." "That's wonderful," my mother said, with what sounded like genuine pride. "We'd love to attend and support you." My instinctive reaction was wariness. Their sudden interest in my professional achievements felt suspect after years of dismissal. But Dr. Keller had encouraged me to allow for the possibility of genuine change while maintaining clear boundaries. "Thank you," I replied carefully. "I'd be open to you attending, but I want to be clear, this is a professional achievement that's important to me. If you come, I need it to be about supporting me, not about family drama or attempting to re-establish old patterns." My father predictably took offense. "Rebecca, we're offering to support you. There's no need to immediately assume we have ulterior motives." "I'm not assuming anything," I said. "I'm communicating my needs clearly. That's what healthy relationships require." After some discussion, they agreed to my terms, and we made plans for them to attend the ceremony, but not to stay with me or monopolize my time during the professional networking event surrounding it. When the evening of the ceremony arrived, I stood backstage in my carefully chosen midnight blue gown, feeling a complex mixture of pride in my achievement and anxiety about my family's presence. Emma, who had flown in from Chicago to support me, squeezed my hand. "Remember," she whispered, "this is your moment, regardless of how they respond to it." Receiving the award, hearing my name called, walking across the stage, delivering my brief acceptance speech to a room of industry peers who valued my contributions, was surreal and validating in equal measure. As I returned to my table, I caught sight of my parents in the audience. My father sat stiffly in his suit, his expression unreadable. My mother dabbed at her eyes with a tissue. Neither reaction told me much about their true thoughts, and I realized with sudden clarity that it didn't matter. Their approval or disapproval couldn't diminish what I had accomplished. At the reception afterward, they approached with awkward congratulations, clearly uncertain of their role in this aspect of my life they had largely ignored. My father attempted to take credit in his conversation with my boss, always knew she had potential. Gets her analytical mind from me, but stopped when he caught my raised eyebrow. My mother surprisingly made a genuine effort. "I didn't understand much of the technical aspects they mentioned in your award," she admitted, "but it was clear how respected you are by your colleagues. I'm sorry I haven't paid more attention to this part of your life." It wasn't a comprehensive acknowledgement of the past, but it was a moment of authentic connection, the kind I had stopped expecting from her years ago. As I flew back to London the following day, I reflected on the journey of the past year. From the devastation of my 30th birthday to the triumph of professional recognition, from the painful family confrontation to the careful reconstruction of relationships on new terms, it had been a transformation more complete than I could have imagined. Paris, the city that had once symbolized my exclusion from family celebration, now sat just a train ride away from my London home. The weekend after the awards ceremony, I booked a ticket on the Eurostar, packed a small bag and took myself to the City of Lights, not as anyone's accessory or afterthought, but as the main character in my own adventure. Standing on the observation deck of the Eiffel Tower, watching the city lights twinkle below as dusk fell, I felt a profound sense of peace. The family dynamics that had shaped me hadn't disappeared entirely, and the work of maintaining healthy boundaries would be ongoing. But I had broken free from the role that had confined me for 30 years, and in doing so discovered a strength I hadn't known I possessed. I was Rebecca Wilson, award-winning financial analyst, loyal friend, boundary-setting daughter, London, resident independent traveler, and finally, unquestionably enough, exactly as I was. Have you ever had to set boundaries with family members who couldn't see your worth, or found yourself gaining strength after standing up to those who took you for granted? Your experiences might help others who are still finding their voice. Drop a comment below, and if this story resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe to hear more true family stories. Thank you for coming with me on this journey of self-discovery and boundary setting. Remember, sometimes the family you choose is more valuable than the family you're born into. See you in the next story.